Yes, they've got the cameras there. However, the president...
Incredible. That's the word for what we just saw there. The British hostages being released, having a one-on-one exchange with Ahmadinejad, which was obviously a staged event, saying, Nathan Summers saying to him, we are very grateful for your forgiveness, thanks to you and to the Iranian people. The next hostage, I couldn't hear it that well. It sounded like he said something about some sort of compulsory truth or compulsory something, and then the next one saying to Ahmadinejad, you've been very kind to us. So some would argue that is clearly propaganda being put out there for the public to latch onto. Let's ask Joe Cirincione what he thinks. He's a security and international policy. He's with them, the Center for American Progress, an expert. Joe, thanks for being with us.
Sure, my pleasure.
Your reaction to that stunning exchange we just watched?
Well, it tells you that when you're strong, you don't have to shout. The British are in a position of strength here. They can afford to be polite, to be gracious. Great Britain is getting what it wants, the release of its hostages, and this is part of the diplomatic niceties we often see. Don't interpret this as a sign of weakness on the part of Great Britain. This is the sort of the oil that smooths the diplomatic machinery that has allowed this release. I think there's a comparison here between how the British handled this Iranian crisis with how the U.S. handled a crisis exactly 6 years ago this week when the Chinese seized 28 U.S. airmen whose plane had strayed into Chinese airspace. At first there was harsh rhetoric on both sides, then things calmed down. Our president, President Bush, issued a statement of regret, even an apology, and the airmen came home. I think you're seeing a similar technique used by the British to great effect.
I mean, the bottom line is that without any bullets having been fired, without any missiles having been launched, these 15 sailors and Marines have been released.
Yes.
They appear to be in good health. They're obviously alive, at least from what we've seen and what we've heard. Do you consider this a success for the Blair administration?
I do consider it a success, and it's also a setback for Ahmadinejad. Never underestimate the role of domestic politics in crises like this. Remember, it was the Revolutionary Guard, these are the allies of President Ahmadinejad, who seized these sailors in the first place. Inside Iran, over the last 12 to 10 days, there hasn't been that much publicity about this. This has not been a major story in Iran. That's caused the pragmatists, the sort of people who run the government of Iran, wanted to downplay this, didn't want to give this a cause to Ahmadinejad. And what you saw, I think, was the pressure from the pragmatists, including the supreme leader, that forced Ahmadinejad and the Revolutionary Guard to release this. So even though you're seeing this sort of theater and Ahmadinejad assuming center stage here, this is actually a cover for a loss for him. He would have liked this crisis to go on. He was forced to release them. That's not only a victory for the British, it's a victory for the pragmatists inside the Iranian government, and it could be a good omen for how we could deal with the nuclear crisis.
That was the point I wanted to ask you about next, Joe. How does this affect, if at all, what's happening at the UN with respect to the demands and sanctions on Iran?
Well, I very much agree with the last guest you had on from Great Britain, and there's another old saying that in every crisis there's an opportunity. This could be a way to sort of pivot from the cooperation that the British and the Iranians have forged over the release of these sailors to a dialogue over a solution to the nuclear crisis. Again, you know, when you're strong, you don't have to shout. The U.S., the West, the UN Security Council is in a position of strength here. We have isolated Iran. The diplomatic and economic sanctions are causing real pain inside Iran and opening up political fissures that are weakening the hardliners, including President Ahmadinejad. With a little bit of dialogue, a little bit of engagement to add to this containment policy, I think we can get a diplomatic solution to the nuclear crisis. And remember the way this one unfolded. This is the way the Iranians negotiate. It's no, 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 no until it's yes.
Right.
And there's this sudden turn like we saw today. Look for that later this year in the nuclear crisis.
Joe Cirincione, thank you so much. Very interesting. And just so our viewers know, that